to our guest on Empathy Inbound today, Jane Fischer. Today's conversation will be as much about Jane's wonderful daughter Suzy as it will be about Jane. And let me explain. So doctors gave Suzy Fischer a grim prognosis at birth. She would never walk, talk, live independently, or have meaningful relationships. Certainly not the words you hope to hear when you've just given birth to your beautiful daughter. Born with severe brain abnormalities and the rare Joubert syndrome, she faced a lifetime of nevers. But her mother, our guest, Jane Fischer, refused to accept that future and devoted herself to giving Suzy the fullest possible life. Following the birth of Suzy, Jane became a special educational professional, a teacher of the handicapped, a learning consultant, and, as you'll learn, so much more. Suzy's miraculous journey has given many experts reason to question the medical textbooks that have been written. Suzy is the oldest living person with the rare condition Joubert syndrome. Thankfully, Jane has documented and written the most authentic book, If You Knew Suzy, Pushing Past the Boundaries of Never, which explores both Jane's past and Suzy's upbringing. There's a lot to explore, but thank you, first of all, so much for joining today. You've already been very kind in your conversation before we started, so I'm really looking forward to this. And I know we are going to talk a lot about Suzy, but I just wanted to start by understanding a little bit about you. What was your life like in your formative years and before you had children?
Well, interestingly, I'm in college, and I was a very different person. I was a quiet person. I guess you could say I was a plain Jane. Never thought I would be faced with saving a person's life, as it turned out. I was challenged with Suzy. And in some way, when I speak about Suzy later, Suzy gave me a voice. I think my parents, had my dad lived, and certainly my mother expressed this numerous times, they would have been shocked to see me as a lioness, shocked to see me emerge. And I really became a leader in the whole field of special education. I went on to get my I was an elementary school teacher, on to get my teacher of the handicapped. I then went on to get my certification as a learning consultant, and then my master's in special education. And it's almost as a Suzy, and I almost feel badly saying this because I've seen her travails, and if I could, I would change it in a minute and go back to plain Jane. But it's almost as though Suzy gave me a purpose in life, and beyond just motherhood and being a wife or whatever, she shaped me. She molded me in a very strong advocate, a champion, warrior. I look back how I did it, quite frankly, but I knew that given, we were going to maximize that potential. We were going to find it. We were not going to buy stock in Kleenex and cry for the rest of her life. We were going to begin to fight. And fight we did. She did. She's an amazing, amazing human being. She was born with this courage and tenacity, will to accomplish. And I'd like to think I was the wind beneath her wings that helped her achieve what she did.
It's really interesting that I think maybe a lot of people in different situations almost find it easier or find more of a reason to advocate for somebody else rather than for themselves. And you sometimes read those stories in the newspaper that I don't know, a child gets trapped under a car and the sort of 50-kilo mom lifts the car up and pulls the child out and things, and they can never do it again. And I said before we started, my sister had a few challenges, and there's like literally nothing my dad wouldn't have done to support her and do whatever, but he wouldn't have done that for himself. Just when he got
Absolutely.
that purpose. And in the book, when you talk about, it's a really nice chapter, you talk about meeting your husband at college, and it sounds like this sort of start of a very, and it's completely the wrong word, but a very normal life. Meet the love of your life in college, marry them, follow them, do this, do that, and that's it. Live happily ever after. And it, I guess for you, you had Beth very successfully, and a beautiful daughter. Then you having Suzy, and what was it? Can you remember the emotion when the doctors first? I know the first of all they took her away, and you were saying, I want to see her, I want to be with her, what's happening? And I guess they tried to explain Joubert syndrome and tried to explain what was happening. What were the sensations and feelings you had when it explained she wasn't like Beth?
Well, it was interesting because I was 24 years old. I had a 2.5-year toddler at home.
Yeah.
And what was so not interesting, but it really mystified the doctors. When I was with Beth, my father passed away, and I was very close with my dad, and I was emotionally distraught. And if God forbid, Beth had been born with any kind of abnormality, people would have said, well, she had such an emotional trauma during her pregnancy. How Beth was fine. In fact, I want to talk a little bit about Beth and Ben. But when I became pregnant with Suzy, I had a very, very normal pregnancy. It was 2.5 years later. I had this a darling little girl. My husband and I had just bought a house. We were, for all intents and purposes, this been out really, 10 toes, 10 fingers, just ready to enter the world. But as it turned out, that didn't happen. She was born. There were alleys with Suzy. She had extra digits on hands, which in and of itself is not a big deal.
Yeah.
But her head was slightly lower body. She couldn't latch on to the breast or a bottle. She had a very poor suck. And all this together created the suspicion that there were going to be problems down the road. I had no idea. They say I was expecting a beautiful little baby. The book goes in to describe how I felt. When we were all over, we started to go all over, and one of the leading pediatric neurologists at that time at Columbia Presbyterian, he knew, he did through all the testing, all the brain dysfunction. And I remember it like it was yesterday. He began to tell us, all that was wrong with Suzy. And he intimated that, you have a half-year-old toddler at home. You have a husband. I don't think that she'll ever, I don't believe she'll ever walk, learn, or have any kind of normal life. And I remember feeling, he intimated that maybe we should begin to look for a residential placement. And I remember feeling, this is my baby. Never. This is my child. And my brother was a resident in pediatrics at that time at Montefiore Hospital. He too was very concerned about me. He was concerned about Suzy, but he was very concerned about me. Yeah. Because I was very fragile, and he began to talk to me a little bit about the future, and this is my child. No matter what she can do, no matter how we have to help her, she is going to talk. I will not accept that, never. And as I said before, I made up my mind I could cry for the rest of her, begin to fight. But I had no idea what that meant, Yeah. There was no Google. There was no computer. This was 50 years ago. So I was kind of on my own with a very needy toddler, who wanted her mommy. And I just began to search, and one fall, that's how we got information. One phone call, began to research anything and everything I could do to start helping her. And Suzy herself, it was interesting, even as a baby, an infant, she always instinctively seemed to know what she should be doing. I think of the fact that she had a 2.5-year-old sister who incorporated her. the play therapy, the play house, play school, play dancing school. She always seemed to know what she should be doing, but she didn't know how to get there. Her body wouldn't allow her. So we found an infant stimulation program, which if I can urge all parents, to begin to get that baby into therapy as soon as possible. And they were far and few between. Now, of course, it's much more common for many centers to have infant stim. But we had to travel an hour and a half a day to get her in stimulation so that she could receive the therapy and I can be taught at home. And our life continually, it revolved around Suzy and of course Beth, doing what I needed to do to get her all the help that she could. Looking back, when you had it, I feel I was just on autopilot. It was just head. I was devastated. I was in pain. I think it affected my marriage. My husband was wonderful, but we had just moved in his house. We had 2 very young children, and I was just consumed with helping Suzy to reach her milestones, which were all delayed, but we continued to fight. And then when she was a toddler, we found the Easter Seals program, which also, helped her receive the things that she needed. And I guess the one story I want to tell is that when she was 2 years old, she wasn't walking yet. So they would almost tie her into a standing board to help her strengthen some of her muscles. And she would cry, reach her arms at me, "Mommy, please." It was so hard to watch. But when I went to get her, when I went to take her out, there was one very wise woman who said to me, "Mrs. Fischer, if Suzy's going to achieve anything, you have to learn to sit on your hands." And that remark kind of followed me throughout Suzy's life. Nothing was easy, but we had to let her stumble and fall. We couldn't save her at every turn. And it was probably the most difficult lesson, not to be able to run and help, whether it was walking or talking, or we had to teach her to try. We had to not teach, but insist that she try. And it was a very hard lesson because as I said, I'm a very soft-hearted, it was very difficult to have to become or have to practice this tough love. But that's how we raised her.
And where do you think the resilience and being able to do the hard things, where did that come from for you? Are you very spiritual? Is it your character? Where do you think that resilience came from?
I'll answer it in Suzy's words. A few months ago, we had an author's talk, and she speaks to the audience for a few minutes after I speak. And one of the members in the audience said to her, "Suzy, where do you find your strength?" Because nothing's been easy for Suzy. Everything that she's accomplished has been the hard way. And her answer to them, she looked at me and I said, they asked you the question, you have to answer it. And she looked at the person and she said, "I was born with it." She said, "I was born with the strength." And I do believe that is true. My husband, I have to give him credit. He is also a type A, a very motivated, never give up kind of person. And I can't say she's got that from me. I became that way, but I didn't have her ability. I raised her say can't. She will tell you this today, and I think a lot of it is genetic, and a lot of it is maybe, I'd like to believe, God's gift. She just, and again, I guess we'll get knowing what she's been through, not only her special needs, but as we'll go on, I guess, and talk about her transplants, and thyroid cancer in between. But I call it the Suzy effect. She has this ability to make everybody she meets a better person. And she does it with the purity of soul and the kindness of heart. She doesn't know how to lie. She doesn't have any guile. She's not, manipulative. She doesn't even know how to manipulate. It's this, whoever she meets, they recognize her kindness and her celestial quality. And she knows what to say. She'll say, if she met you, for instance, she'll say, hi, and she'll shake her hand. She says, I'm Suzy. It's so nice to meet you. Sorry you had to run from the bus. She just picks up on, and it's not anything she's trying to manipulate you. She's just and kind.
Says what she feels, which a lot of us don't do, really, do we?
Yes.
I just wanted to touch on something you said there, and you were very you were very open and transparent in the book, and I think you wrote some difficult things, I think, and I may be paraphrasing it, but I think at one stage, I think your husband said, okay, I'm gonna leave this to you, but I'm gonna support you all the way, but there can't be sort of two decision makers about what happens for Suzy. You're completely in this, Jane. You're living this world. This is your life now. So I'm gonna let you make the decisions, and I'm gonna be supportive of whatever you do. First of all, have I sort of summarized that vaguely correctly? Mm-hmm. And then secondly, is that what you wanted? You wanted to lead on this and be the person that was making the decisions?
I don't think I wanted it, but I think it's the way it had to be.
Yeah.
Because my husband, he's a wonderful man. He's a good man, but we have very different styles. And, in the beginning, it was very hard for me because we would leave the doctor's office and I would be hysterical crying. And he would say, why are you crying? And I'd say, because the doctor said A, B, C. And he said, it's not what I heard, Yeah. He was in denial. And I had even my mom and my mother, they just didn't get it. I heard how grave it was. But, if you don't want to believe something, you can always draw the curtains, and deceive yourself and delude yourself. And hard because we were fighting all the time. We didn't have the finances which we needed. Preschool was not mandated. The school system now, of course, it's age 5. Then at 3, we petitioned the school system for some help, and we were denied because it wasn't legal. Yeah, and I was not going to let her languish those years. I wanted her to be in a preschool, and it was very expensive, and we did without a lot. Ben and I didn't agree a lot. A child with any kind of challenge puts a lot of strain on a marriage. And, the classic story that I tell is when we were married 25 years, I said to him, Al, it's amazing that we're still, why do you think we're still married? He looked at me in all sincerity and he said, it's because I'm such a responsible person. And, I remember saying, oh my gosh, that's just what a wife wants to hear after 25 years of marriage, how responsible you are. But there's some truth to that. I mean, it really, it takes away a lot of time from a marriage. My other 2 children, they incredibly supportive. As I said to you before, Beth has probably been the greatest teacher and therapist at 3 years old. Just by exposed play, she always incorporated Suzy in all of her play. You'd be surprised how much language stimulation there is in play. She was always very kind, and then of course, and we can talk about this. My son, who my husband was not certain whether their child. He was afraid,
Yeah, of
and
course.
we were told, and I don't know if this is something you want to talk about later, so I'll stop, that we went for all kinds of genetic testing. We were told there was no reason to believe. This was about 37 years ago. There was no reason to believe there was a genetic component with Suzy's issues. The etiology is unknown. And we had my son, and thank God we didn't know, because he's the most wonderful human being and also adores Suzy. And both Beth and Ben have been such great champions for her and still are. And, we, as a family, and I was very fortunate, my brothers, their children, their wives, I had a very, very great support system, in them. As I said before, to lead you to believe that you can't get through this disingenuous. I think it definitely can affect a marriage and relationships as a whole. But I wouldn't do it any differently.
I know No, I know you said that at the end of the book you wouldn't make any decisions differently you made tough decisions and you sort of stand by them. And I know one of the things in the book that that I really felt when you sort of wrote it, you sort of talked about Beth was an incredibly attached child to you when she was sort of growing up, when she was very, very young and super attached, and you sent her away sent her to a program when she was sort of 2.5. And I think you recognized quite quickly that wasn't the best thing for Beth, but you're trying to balance that with the other responsibility that you had. I wondered how you reflected upon that decision.
That's probably one of my greatest regrets. And I feel very, very good about that. I can't change it, but I can recognize it and acknowledge it. And in spite of me, she turned out to be this incredible woman who is a teacher and has 2 wonderful young teenagers herself. I thought I was doing the right thing. Looking back now that as I said, I was 24 years old.
Yeah.
What did I know? Beth was a very anxious child. I understand a lot more about her. She was very attached to me, only wanted me. And here I had infant who was so disabled and also, needed so much attention. I thought at the time it would be good for Beth to go to a preschool. It was a neighborhood preschool, and it would give me some time. As I say, I was taking Suzy to infant stimulation, an hour and a half away. But it was not the right decision. She needed to be with me. She needed to, I think she felt abandoned, when I insisted that she go to preschool. And, if she were here, she'd say, well, Mom, don't worry about it. I grew up in spite of, your mistake. But it does make me feel badly. Listen, I'll take it to the grave. I wish I understood more about anxiety in children at that time. I probably would have done things.
I don't think we do. I remember when my mum had me, so I didn't go to preschool at all. So for my first time ever doing anything like that was going to school when I was 5, when it was just mornings and things. I remember Mum saying that I cried and refused to let go of her for the entire first 6 months.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like get over it next day. It was like my first day back. I mean, she sort of said, I said to her, okay, well, that's it. I've done school now, and I've been for one morning. And she said, yeah. So I think again, because my dad was at work all the time and worked very odd hours and things, I was always with Mum. And then suddenly when that's taken away from you, first of all, I guess as a child, you think, what have I done wrong and why are they doing this? And it's difficult. And I think especially in your case, I remember sort of reading in the book, and you talk about Beth being attached to you, but just as an example for people that haven't read the book yet, I remember there's an instance where I think your husband physically tried to take Beth off you.
Yes.
And I think that led to Beth just completely mistrusting him. So the poor guy has got his first daughter is it's completely attached to you. The second daughter, you're trying to deal with, is thinking, oh my goodness. It's funny how we get so attached to one. I was so attached to my mum, and it sounds like Beth and I sound quite similar. I was quite anxious, and Beth and I both grown up, and we've got over it, and I've got children, Beth's got children, we've managed okay. But I think at the time for mum, it must have been hard, and for you definitely. And you don't realize as a child, you walk away crying, and you probably don't see your mum's walking away crying as well. It's a funny thing as a child, really. Sorry, you just reminded me of my mum telling me that about.
It's very similar. My husband too worked very long. He wasn't home. He was trying to make a living. And many long hours. Yes.
How did you can't ever think that caregiving and support and nurturing in a way that you do and have done, you can't ever think that doesn't come without an emotional toll. So I just wondered, and this is, this initially was in the days before everybody had a therapist and everybody did mindfulness and meditation and yoga and everything else. How did you look after your own mental well-being at the time? Did you think about it at all? Or you would just go and just couldn't wind down? Did you ever collapse on the sofa with a glass of wine? Were you sort of walking in the fresh air, listening to the birds? What did you ever do to sort of try and give yourself some respite?
Honestly, I didn't have time for any of that. I was taking care of three children. I talk about after my son was born, 3 little children. Each one had issues. Suzy, of course, was like having 6 children in one. I had my mom, I took care of. She was aged and needed help, and she was an incredible woman and a great support system to me. So when she needed help, I wanted to be there for her. I was working, I was a wife. I became a special education PT. I became entrenched in the world of special education. We started looking back. I don't know how I need some mental health. I did go at one point, and we didn't touch upon this yet, but of course, when Suzy was 24 years old, she was diagnosed with end-stage kidney failure, which I guess we'll get into, which makes her story that much more incredible. It's not only her special needs, but then she finally gets to a point where she is in a supervised living program. And I don't want to jump ahead because it's probably something.
It links together, yeah.
At that point I crashed. When she was diagnosed with end-stage kidney failure and was so very, very sick, and I couldn't give her my kidney because I was the wrong blood type. Then I crashed. I had my time when I didn't think I put myself together to see my child so terribly ill and not be able to do anything after all we had been through. And then I did start to see a psychologist. And help. I desperately needed help. I denied the fact, I could do this. I'm going to myself, back together. What can anyone tell me? All the pat statements, but it was very helpful. I happened to find, and I never had the glass of wine or took the walk, but I did when I felt that I was just going to combust. I did take a couple of minutes, go up to my room, take a deep breath and just try to put myself back together. Dr. Gorowski, he was my savior, if you will, and gave me some strategies and how to cope. But there were plenty of times when,
Absolutely. And it's real old, but it's a real truism. And I mentioned before we start recording about my sister had some sort of mild learning difficulties and some sort of challenging things, but she also had oh my goodness, she was one that had the sort of fainting fits, and she had eczema, and she had asthma, and she had everything. I had nothing. And my wife's sister is similar in terms of, so she has asthma and eczema and all the different things. It seems to be that one poor child in the family, I mean my limited experience, seems to get everything. And then, like I say, when you when you just think things are moving ahead and you can sort of almost, I'm sure you never did this, but almost give yourself a pat on the back saying, well, all those people that said Suzy would never walk or talk or whatever, they look at what are you doing now? And then the doctor says, yeah, I'm sorry to tell you, Suzy's in sort of kidney failure. You must sort of think, what the heck? Just give me a break. It's, yeah, I can understand where it suddenly feels, but no. Suzy's had her bad stuff. It's not Suzy's turn now. But and I did want to, and I'll go backwards and forwards a bit. But I did want to. The main thing I was really curious about with the kidney transplants, it turned out, and thankfully she got the transplants and sort of survived. But how did Suzy understand or cope with the idea that somebody else had to pass away and that she was going to have part of their body in her body? How did you help her understand that? Did she, not say was she comfortable with it? Because I guess the option is not, but it's a very odd concept for anybody, really.
Yes.
And we think, well, gosh, this person's, I'm only going to be saved if somebody else has given their life. It's a very odd concept for anybody. And I just wondered how Suzy understood it and how you tried to explain it to her.
Yeah, it is a very interesting story. Suzy had tremendous, what they call survivor's remorse. And as in, because as limited as she is in areas, that's how empathetic she is.
Yeah.
So many other areas. And particularly she's had 2 transplants.
Yeah.
And second transplant, she was older. It was 13 later. And it was a 23-year-old young man who had been in a motorcycle accident.
Yeah.
And when she heard about that, she cried, "Mommy, how can I take his kidney? He was younger than me. He had to die for me to get better, you know." And she was on dialysis, and she was terribly sick. And I held her and said we understood how she felt, but we can't help that he passed. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy. But I know, and his mom had written a letter, as hard as it was, that if he had to lose his life, he would want to save someone as special as her. And she for days, she had this terrible guilt. We had to get her help. She couldn't embrace the fact that she was going to have his kidney in her body, going to get her off dialysis and hopefully live in. She just couldn't get past the fact that he had to die for saved.
Yeah.
And we did get her help. And then, I had said to her, "Suzy, if you don't take this kidney, nobody else will." And I don't think anybody, I know nobody is as special as you, and nobody deserves it more than you. And he would want, his name was Jose. Jose would want you to have his kidney. Finally got, in fact, every year we celebrate his birthday. Every year we light a candle, we talk about him, because it's important for her to know that she remembers and thanks him for giving her the gift of life. And we only are involved in the world of special education. Now we've become involved in the world of organ donation.
Yes, I did think that. Okay, if you haven't got enough on your plate, right? Transplant now. Oh goodness me! It literally is. Yeah, you seem to just stand there with your arms open and say, "Right, what can you throw at me now?" And I guess it's I sort of, and this is not really a question, but it's more of a musing, I guess. I just wonder what your life, what your achievements, what would happen if you only had Beth and had no more children, and just what would happen to you? Because, like I say, it's not that you said at the beginning, sort of Suzy gave you purpose, and it's really interesting that obviously you obviously had that steel within you. Absolutely, you can't manufacture that. You've got that absolute rugged determination to get things done. And yeah, you just wonder what would happen if you'd. I mean, you can never. How on earth would you know? So I said it's not really a question. It's just gosh, you sort of managed to achieve all this, and it's because something terrible happened, and it's it's just fascinating, isn't it? How people's lives can change on a dime, really.
Absolutely.
Just certain sliding door moments. Well, if this had happened, if that hadn't happened, it's you really never know. You really never know about life and what's going to happen, really. Sorry, I said it wasn't really a question. It was just amusing. You always wonder that what if, don't you? I guess.
Yeah, it's funny. Funny you should ask, because many years ago, my son, who was a teenager at that time, we were driving in the car, and he said something. It was a particularly bad day for me, and he said, "Mom, did you ever stop to think what your life would have been like if Suzy were normal?" And it was an epiphany for me, because I actually never had a lot of thought, but what he was really asking me, what all our life, the whole family's life, and it would have been an entirely different life, entirely different. Having said that, I believe Suzy was sent to us for a reason. I'd like to think that we would have been good people regardless. I think we would have been good people. I think she has made such an indelible imprint on all our lives, and she's taught us so many lessons. And what's makes me feel so badly is that she's taught us lessons, but had to struggle, her whole life. She's my Joubert, she's nothing's easy. No, excuse me. Nothing's been without, and not only us, not only our immediate family, whoever she touches, whoever the nurses, the teachers, the custodian, it doesn't matter. She doesn't know class. She doesn't know. She just has it. I call it the Suzy effect. One of the doctors, just a very quick story. One of the doctors who, they never look at her because they don't think she'll understand very much. And when she needed a kidney, and we were flying all over the country to get her on lists, one of the doctors was talking, and a very, very renowned nephrologist. And she turned to him and she said, "Dr. Smith, can I ask a question?" And he looked at her like, what is she going to ask me? I don't want my sister's kidney. My sister is 22 years old. She's got to get married. She has to have babies. Suppose I don't want her kidney. I'll wait. And he looked at me and he said, "Some of my Harvard graduates don't think like she does." He said, "Suzy, that's amazing." He said, "Don't ever let anyone judge her by a report, by an IQ score." And that's a very important piece, that, there's IQ, and I write about this in the book. I'm there. We'll read it and hear her story. There's IQ and there's EQ. And while her IQ is very compromised, her EQ superior. And that ultimately is what's so important. It's your soul. It's your heart. It's your ability to embrace people, that it is so very crucial in life. And she has it. She has it. So I don't know what our lives would have been like, but I think, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm such a pious individual, but I think God sent her to us to love, to cherish, to support.
Yeah, I think there are some religions that almost their core belief is that people are only sent as much as they're able to cope with. And I guess that's, Suzy was going to come into the world, and it was, okay, well, we need a family that can cope with this, hard as it will be. And in many ways, you're sort of chosen, I guess. And like for reasons you can never understand yourself until it sort of happens. And that's it. You never got more than you could physically cope with. One of the things you said there, I wanted to touch on, you talked about doctors were sort of taught to you as opposed to referring to Suzy and things. And I've had friends that have physical handicaps and things, and people were taught to their partner as opposed to them, even though they're completely, their IQ is probably off the charts, but they happen to physically be in a wheelchair or whatever. And people tend to do that, tend to sort of talk over people or to somebody with somebody. So how did you almost fight that challenge and try and ensure that Suzy was seen as Suzy as opposed to the diagnosis that Suzy has? Because they're two different things, I think. Suzy is obviously a person that has some challenges, whereas the diagnosis is something very different. How did you get people to see Suzy as Suzy?
You fight. And here, an interesting story, and this kind of answers your question. When Suzy was 10 years old, she saw her siblings go to sleepaway camp, and she wanted to go to sleepaway camp. As I said, she always knew what should happen, but wasn't able. And I had found this, I didn't know how I was going to send her, because we were attached by the hip. I didn't know how I was going to send my child a night away, let alone several weeks away. Well, anyway, we found a camp for special education, and they wanted all the reports. I sent it to them, and they called me back and they said that they didn't think it was an appropriate camp for Suzy. And I said to him, Jim, it was in Utica, New York. I said, let me fly up with Suzy. Let me come up with Suzy and meet her on your turf. And if you don't think it's an appropriate camp for Suzy, we'll part friends. You'll never hear from me, and we'll go our separate ways. Well, he was reluctant. I said, listen, he said, it's so much time. I said, it's my time and it's my pennies. Let me come up. So we did. And in fact, Suzy, I'm a terrible flyer, flying. And we flew the prop plane to Utica, New York. And I said, for you, would I get on this plane? Only for you. Well, we went up to Camp Northwood, and Jim Ross was up at the airport, and he met her, and he couldn't get over her. Everyone she met, hi, I am so glad to be here. She would compliment, I love your shirt, Jim. You look beautiful. You look so handsome. And everyone she met, if she saw the swimming instructor, she would say, I can't wait to get here so that I could learn to surf. And if she saw the tennis, she said, oh, I take tennis. And people couldn't get over her. So when he took us back to the airport, I said, so what do you, she said, so he said, I want her. He said, I want her. She's an inspiration. She's a breath of fresh air. He said, the only thing I'm going to ask you is someone as foolish as I was, judge her from a report. And she went on to go to Camp North for 50, and every year Jim reminded me of this experience and how grateful he was. So I guess to answer your question, sometimes you really have to knock doors to get people to see her, to recognize her, to know how special she was. Yeah. There were plenty of people who kind of closed that door and didn't think she was capable of any jobs. I mean, she works now in a preschool, and they adore her. She's an aide. She's an aide in a preschool, and it wasn't easy to find her a job. But again, you have to be a crusader. You have to fight for this child, because the world has priests, and I think it behooves us to try to knock down some of those fences and see the person for who they really are. And that's what we tried to do.
It really does. And I think a lot of it is people are rarely as described on paper, reports, whatever. And I even find it's a very different thing. If I'm looking for somebody to hire or interviewing, whatever, yes, you get the resume and you read through it and stuff. But don't ignore them, but I just think I'm not going to take somebody and not take somebody because of their grammar or what they're supposedly done, whatever. You've really got to meet the person, I think. But it takes a special person to do well, to get on a prop plane, to fly up there and do that. But I could almost so hear a little bit in the way you described it, in what Jim would have heard when you rang him, the way you sort of said, "Now, Jim." I could just almost hear the guy thinking, "Oh right, we've got one of those, have we? Okay." And he's always he knows he's beaten. He knows he's beaten before you say anything else, really. But how did it feel for you when your daughter, who you've been around so much and you'd supported in so many ways and stuff, and then she goes off to camp and you're not there? She doesn't need you for those few days. How did you go crazy and live in a spa for 3 days? Did you walk around the house thinking, "Oh my goodness, what's happening with Suzy? What's she doing? How I hope they've not forgotten this or forgotten that." How did you cope with suddenly being a break for you as well, really?
Well, you wouldn't have wanted to be in the car with me when we drove home. my poor husband and Beth, my daughter. The other story that kind of typifies, when again, Suzy saw Beth go to college. And one day we were visiting Beth at college. It was a visiting day, and Suzy was very ebullient, very spirited. All of a sudden she turned to me and she said, "I want to go to college, Mommy. I want to do what Beth does. I want to do what everyone does." And where do you find her a college? There's no college for Suzy, but we did find a school. It was called Maplebrook. It was in Amenia, New York, a school for learning disabled young adults and life skills and vocational skills. And to your point, we went up there, and I was totally against it. But then again, how was I going to send Suzy away? 2.5 hours away. Yeah. Suzy and I were truly, our hearts were connected, our souls were connected. But I always tried to live by the philosophy, it's not about me. And when we brought her up, and again, they met her and they loved her and she was accepted. So now, to answer your question, that day we brought her, it was time for me to go. How did I go? I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave her. And Suzy finally recognized my reluctance. And she said, "Mom, you have to go. I'm going to be okay." She said, "Put your sunglasses on, because I know you're going to cry and you have to go." And honestly, you asked me how I honestly felt like I left my heart. Really, it sounds trite, but I was just distraught. I left my heart on that campus, Amenia, New York. I cried for days, not the whole way home. That I was hysterical, but I cried for days. And it was like a piece of me, a piece of me was missing. And it wasn't until I spoke to her, and even then, I knew I had to be strong. I knew that, I was doing this for her, because I'm not going to live forever. I'd like to, God will give me years, but it's my biggest fear.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to Suzy when I'm no longer here? So in some ways, this was preparation, live without me. And she was the one who precipitated, this decision. So, and she did beautifully. She went on, and in fact, that was when her course was kind of decided as to what she was going to do. She worked in a preschool called Astor Day program. It was a Head Start program, actually. And when we went up there and we met with the teachers, who were working with her, I remember I said to the teacher, "Please tell me, how is Suzy doing? Don't placate me. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Is this something you see in the future?" And the teacher answered in one question, in one sentence. She said, "When Suzy's not here, we are shorthanded." So I kind of, felt, well, maybe this is something that she will be able to find a job in later on. And sure enough, that is what. But it was very devastating for me to be without her. It took a long time to get used to. In some way, if I had to reach down and be very honest, I was shocked she was able to survive without me, and she proved me was able to survive, but she flourished, she thrived. I think it's an important lesson, that we as parents need to learn. Maybe we don't give our challenged children enough credit. Maybe they actually grow from our stepping back, and I've seen her do it over and over again. There are times when I absolutely have to be there when she's had so many medical problems and in the hospital, she needs an advocate with her. But she shocked me, thank goodness. She proved me wrong many times.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's it is so hard, isn't it? Because on one hand, you're almost on one hand, Suzy being able to go to that program and to do that, it's almost that. It's almost the complete validation for everything you've done, isn't it? It's sort of right. Well, okay, I've done it. So the doctor said you wouldn't walk, talk, blah, blah, blah. This is almost the last step. She's surviving without us, and she's on her own. And yeah, I've done it. So there's a tiny bit of things. Well, I should want to accept the plaudits, but then, and I was saying this again at the beginning with my sister having to sort of live on her own now, and she's only ever spent one night on her own in her life. She's sort of 54 now, and I was shocked that she doesn't need me. Sort of that. I don't know whether I thought I was more important than I am, but and it's not. And obviously, again, if bills come in or things happen, she sends a photograph to me and I sort them out and stuff. You do all the things you can do. So yes, obviously she needs me, but I really thought I'd be sort of pretty much living there and maybe coming home for one night a week or whatever. But when suddenly it's like, oh gosh, because quite rightly, your focus and instinct and what we need to do for our children generally is our primary goal is to protect them from harm. That's our primary goal. Yes, we education, we develop all that good stuff, but generally our primary goal is, when they're tiny, stop them running into the road, stop them getting knocked over, stop them falling off the climbing frame, stop them, doing something foolish, whatever. And yes, our primary focus is protection and caring for them. And then when suddenly you're sort of almost outsourcing the protection to the child or the adult, to Suzy, to somebody else, it must feel like a big part of your identity suddenly is gone a little bit.
Yes.
And like I say, you and Suzy were so connected and so much attachment there. So I think it's incredibly brave and giving of you to be able to do that. So I'm sure people have congratulated you before, but I have to add my admiration to just being able to do that.
Thank you.
Because a lot of parents, they get to a point where for them it's about, okay, we've got this far, and okay, that's okay. They need me, and that's part of who I am, and that's what I do, and that's how it will remain. But yeah, you didn't do that. You yes, you flooded the car and the house with tears, but you did it, and look where she is now. Really, yeah, it's just amazing. But with and I just wanted to talk about Ben and Beth for a minute, if that's okay. I'm not trying to pry. I'm just
no, please.
How was their relationship with you and your husband when they were sort of going through their teenage years, where they were, where Beth had her first period, and Ben had his first girlfriend, and all the sort of stuff that we come to our parents for? Did you think they sort of held back on bothering you, if that's the right word, because they knew you were so taken up with the needs of Suzy?
It was very hard. I you know, and again, I'm my harshest critic.
Yeah.
I if they were here, I know they would say, "Mom, you know, we didn't feel that way." But
Yeah.
they had to feel. They had to be their times. I mean, I always try to be there for both of them, and I think I was there 90% of the time. But it was difficult for them, I'm sure. But again, this is another story just to demonstrate, perhaps, when Beth was inducted in a sorority, they asked me to come up and, you know, be with her and bring Suzy. And I had said to her at the time, and this is the first time in Beth's life, I said, you know what, Beth, maybe Suzy will stay with Dad. I felt for the first time in her life, she should be able to shine. She should not have to explain my sister, and she has special. And she said to me, she was very indignant, and she says, Mom, don't you ever say that to me again. She's my sister, and I want her there, she said. And if anyone doesn't understand, that's on them, she said. And that was always the way Ben and Beth treated Suzy. They incorporated her. Ben had friends over one time, and it was the one and only time one of their friends made a remark, you know, I hate this word, but this is the word he used, you know, she's a retard, you know. And oh my God, I had a whole bin. I had to call this boy's mother, and she had to come pick him up, and Ben never spoke to him again. You know, they were always very protective of Suzy. I will say this, though, as they got older and had their own families and own problems, they had their own trials and tribulations. It became more difficult for them to deal with a lot of Suzy's, particularly medical challenges, you know.
Yeah.
And they worried about me. They were very, very worried about me. It took its toll, and they weren't angry at her. They were angry at the situation, you know. I always try to be there for them, but I don't know if, you know, looking back, I think to myself, was I there enough? Did I make them a priority? I tried. They would say I did, but you know what? There's only one. As I said before, the person that I truly feel that I could not give what he needed was my husband. He took, it was Suzy, Beth, Ben, my mom, my job. He took a back seat. And I say that with tremendous remorse, but I know there was not, there were only 24 hours in a day. And I think he was a very good sport to hang in there with me, because if I'm sure you recognize this, the divorce rate is very high among
50%, and then much higher in people with absolutely it is.
Yeah. And I'm grateful that he and he still is, you know, as I said to you before, he would love to go to live in Florida 3 or 4 months a year, and I won't leave Suzy. So the person that really probably paid the greatest price for neglect, if you will, was my husband. Not neglect, maybe that's the wrong word, but he didn't get the attention that he probably needed, and I'm sorry for that, but it's just the way it had to be.
Yeah. And and you're almost sort of benchmarking yourself against the perfect family, really, which doesn't exist, does it? Some people have one child and spend no time with that child at all. Some people have 10 children and obviously can't spend time with all of them because of what happens. Some people have children with 3 children with 3 different partners. Some people have children and never have a partner. So it's But then if the fact that you have that massive amount of empathy, caring, and passion probably certainly meant that your children in particular got as much, if not more, than they got in many of the families. It's just that you have that thought in your head. Yeah, if the three children had all been sort of very similar, how would it have differed? But you just don't know, do you, what on earth could have happened? Who on earth knows what happens to one child or another child or any situation? And it's certainly given Beth and Ben, and I'm sure their partners and their children, so much in terms of ability to be compassionate and caring and altruistic and empathetic, all of those things that a lot of us never learn. They've learned it, and that's made them different, and I would say better people, really. Absolutely. As well, and their partners benefit and their children benefit and all that. And you can look at all the things that somebody might maybe didn't get. You think about, wow, what are all the things that they did get? And you said right at the beginning that, you were into this thinking, right, I'm going to be sort of teaching Suzy all the time. It's going to be very much a one-way situation. But you also admitted that Suzy teaches you a huge amount as well. So it's not a completely one-way street. It is a flow backwards and forwards, like when Suzy said to the doctor, "What about if I don't want to take my sister's kidney? She's going to have kids and everything." And you think, "Well, gosh, wow, where did that come from?" Because it's something you never thinking. And then when Suzy sort of delighted the people at the camp and stuff, and you knew they were going to like it, but she's just complimented the guy's shirt and saying, "Well, I play tennis." You think, "Oh my goodness, at least you couldn't have scripted this any better," and she's just doing it. And it's you must have sort of sat back sometimes and thought, wow, I'm learning stuff all the time here. And I think the biggest thing I think that I took from the book was that you learned that, and this is almost a bizarre thing to say, almost that anything's possible, really, and it proves it, really. So I think it's what would you say are the biggest, or maybe the smallest? What are the things that you think Suzy teaches you, taught you?
Oh, so many lessons. Of course, as I said over and over, she has taught everyone she meets, particularly my whole family, never give up, never give up, never say can't, keep fighting, keep believing, no matter how hard it is. That's how hard it's. And the goodness, she's able to see it. She's able to see the good in people. Again, another quick story, and it will tell you exactly who Suzy is. As I told you before, she is very, very ill, and she goes for blood work very ill. So we go to the lab. She has very tiny veins, and they can never for the first time. And we went into the lab, and the woman was there, a technician, and she was a very bitter, angry. And every time we walked in, Suzy would say, "Hi, Marge, how are you?" And Marge never answered. She was just a nasty person. Wouldn't even acknowledge her. And every time, this went on over and over again. And finally, about the fifth or sixth time, I said to her, "Suzy, why do you keep saying hello to her? She doesn't answer you." She said, "Mom, you don't give up. She has a lot of problems." I don't know how she knew this. She said, "I heard someone talking." She said she has a son in prison, and she has such a hard time. She's children. You got to keep saying hello and be nice. So finally, one day we walked in, and she said, "Marge, hi, I'm here." And Marge looked at me, and she said, "Why does she keep saying hello to me?" So I said to her, "I don't know. Suzy, why do you keep saying hello to Marge?" She said, "Marge, I know you how tired. You work so hard. I don't care if you don't say hello. I do." And from that minute on, Marge looked at me and she said, "She's an angel. She is sent here to me, to this whole planet, to make us better people." From that day on, when Suzy walked into the lab and Marge saw, "Suzy, where are you?" And honestly, this is what she does. She was put on this earth to help make everyone who she meets, a better person, and it's through complete sincerity. I mean, it's not anything that she planned doing, and the lessons that she has brought forth, and it is to continue to make us believe that no matter how hard things are, no matter how difficult things are, no matter what faces you, you have to continue to keep fighting, keep believing, keep enduring. And throughout the book, that's why I'm hoping people will, but not because I don't want to be famous. I don't want, it's not about financial remuneration. It's just a very inspirational story and a heartfelt story about no matter how many challenges, and believe me, Suzy has faced so very many, we have to continue to endure, to fight, to believe, and most of all, to make our own miracles. And that's what Suzy has done. She truly has made her own miracles. I know we didn't talk about this yet. I'll just add 10 years ago, we found out that my brother, who I mentioned is a geneticist at the University of Pennsylvania, that all Suzy's problems are based on a very rare genetic disorder that we had no idea existed until 12 years ago. And it's very, very rare. Both parents have to have this autorecessive gene. We found out Suzy has this gene that inherited from my husband and me. The chances are 1 in millions. And that's another reason I want people to read this book, because it is, the gene can be isolated. It's important if you want to know, if in fact you are carriers. And oldest one in the world to have this, that is known to have this gene. I'm sure that there are other people before her, but we didn't know about Joubert's. So the research team is watching her, because she is the, if you will, the subject for how Joubert's is going to unfold for everyone else. And I never wanted her to have that identity, but again, she is going to make a difference for many, many more people. And, what we've learned from her is endless. How to be a better human being, how to be a courageous human being.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to necessarily be the poster girl for a particular ailment, whatever. But you can't. But if you're going to pick one, you're going. It's the right one to pick, isn't it? Really, you just think. And what does, so because you and your husband have the recessive gene, does that mean that Beth and Ben were carriers? Did they need to get screened before they had children, or was it not work that way?
So Ben has been screened. Ben does have the gene, but his wife does not.
Okay.
So it's a non-starter. Both have to have the gene. And same thing with Beth. There's a 25% chance that Joubert's can be repeated in a family. Thank God, Beth and Ben do not. They are not Joubert's victims. But Suzy was the winner, you could say. She inherited both genes, which is extremely rare. But it is. So we deal with the facts, and we face our challenges. That was her destiny.
Did you always envisage writing the book at some stage? What was the process like? Did it feel? I'm sure it didn't, but just sort of cathartic. Was it painful? Did it clarify things in your mind? Because when people read the book, and I pray that they do, because I sometimes when I talk to people, I really sort of skim through the books very quickly, trying to get through them. With your story, Suzy's story, I think I read it at least. Well, I read it 3 times, and then I passed it on to my my children as well to read. My daughter loves it, and it's first of all, it's a very readable book. It's not a sort of medical textbook type thing. But I wonder it's hard. It's hard to write, and it's hard to write something that's compelling and interesting about somebody that people don't know. What did you always think? I need to document this, or did somebody ask you to do it, and how did it feel writing it? Sorry, there's a lot of questions there, but you know what I'm getting at.
It was all of the above you described, but
Okay.
it was my lifelong dream. I guess you could say it was a top item on my bucket list, and the reason was I didn't want Suzy to be on the. I don't know what Suzy's lifespan is. This is very hard for me. I don't know what the tomorrows are. They're not great. She's had, as they say, 2 transplants and thyroid cancer, and has a whole host of medical challenges. But I didn't want her to be here and not be here and have her legacy die with her. So I wanted future generations. I wanted to somehow document her life, and that other posterity will know all about Aunt Suzy. It was very hard. I had no time to write. I mean, I was writing reports for school, where I was a learning consultant. 5 years ago, I retired right before COVID, and my life's dream. And where do you begin? How do you write 50 years of what I've just touched the surface with you? So I began to write. I've always loved to write. And then I met this wonderful woman, Carol Ann Roth, who, also on the cover. And she was my focus. She kept me, my editor. She was definitely, influential, because I tend to be verbose. I don't know, maybe you picked that up by now. And everything
I'm the same. I'm the same. When I write something, why write 2 lines when I could write a page? Yes, no, absolutely.
Exactly. So she helped me, to really focus and hone in on the issues that needed to be discussed. Yeah. And it took me years. It took me a few years to write the book. And then it morphed into another whole dimension. I was writing it to maintain Suzy's life and to keep, when the time comes, her memory alive. But then it morphed into another whole aspect of Suzy. And that was it's always been our mission to help other people. And when I sent it to the publisher, I sent it to a few publishers. It was turned away. I don't want you to, I would be disingenuous if I told you that it was accepted right away. But then he said to me, this is a book for parents of special needs children. It's a book for parents of people who have had organ donation or medical problems. It's a book for anyone who has challenges. She said, well, it's not a textbook. It is somewhat of a guide. And hearing Suzy's story, and knowing that, you also face tremendous challenges, whoever is reading it, he said, this could be life-changing, for many people. So I felt our mission her mission continues to make a difference for not only future generations, or not only for anyone facing challenges, but for future generations. It is a truly I believe it to be, a truly life-changing book, an inspirational book. And the feedback has been just that for me. I've received letters and emails from people thanking us, for giving them hope. In a world now that is so plagued with bad news and terrible stories like this, to try to help you to face the tomorrows, So I'm hoping that through our travails, we can make a difference and give people hope and the chance to regroup and begin to fight. And I hope that people will read If You Knew Suzy, Pushing Past the Boundaries of Never, and extrapolate some piece of it, to help them in their life challenges.
because when yes. So when I read it, I think I was surprised how much joy there was in the book. And I don't know whether that's a word you'd recognize,
Yeah.
but I was surprised how much. And so it's not lecturing, it's not holier than thou, it's not pious. It's heartfelt, and there are points in it where I said, "What are you laughing at?" And I sort of laughed out loud. And
Oh, that's okay. That's good.
there are points where you sort of find your eyes are leaking for some strange reason. But I think above all, I think it is a book of inspiration and joy, I would say. But also, what I felt when I read it is that I wouldn't want people just to think it's a book for somebody that has a similar challenge or a particular challenge, whatever. It's almost one of those books where it's just a sort of life-affirming book in a way. It's sort of okay, and it's almost generally, no matter what the challenge is, whether you're challenging your job, challenging your relationship, challenging whatever, it's look, there's some stuff that's sent to us that you think, how on earth am I going to cope with this? And there are some people out there that clearly demonstrate you can be coped with, and that's what I took from it. It does feel like not to give you more work, it does feel like a very natural film. It does feel like a very visual story as well, I think. Hopefully somebody will think of that, but it does sort of feel that way, really. So just going back to other parents that perhaps have a child that has maybe a rare condition, or maybe a not so rare condition, something that people would use the word, this child isn't going to have a normal life, whatever that means. What would you say to them, and what would you have wanted somebody to say to you, not necessarily in the medical profession, but when you first come out of the hospital with the child or is first diagnosed, whatever? What could you say to somebody, and what would you want somebody to have said to you?
Yeah, and this is something I said when I faced parents, and I was working with parents. I was a case manager for children with disabilities, and I would say nobody knows your child like you do. Nobody knows, so I don't care whether it's a doctor or a teacher or a therapist, a friend. You have to be your child's advocate. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to what's being told to you. That doesn't mean you hear what's being told. It just means you hear it, you dissect it, you comprehend it, you interpret it. But the final chapter is your decision. And you might not be right, but that's okay, because you can check down the road. But you have to know you are their mother, you are their father, and you must be the one to make that decision and advocate, never accept never. And I was criticized. I was told I was unrealistic. I was told if she could tie her shoe, it would be I would be lucky. And she's gone on. I remember when I told them that I, many, many years ago, wanted her to be exposed to a keyboard because I felt that, and I was told by a psychologist that I was absolutely deceiving myself. She had such fine motor difficulties. She would never be able to use a keyboard. And I said, did you even try? And well, it's impossible. I said, no, word that doesn't exist for us. So I would tell, and she went on and she learned the keyboard. She's better at the computer than I am right now. I'm techie. But that my advice would be to please, and those parents who have children who are young, get them in therapy at a young age. I truly believe there's a lot of plasticity in in the brain. And I've been told this by, the only reason Suzy did what she was able to do was I truly believe those neural pathways that were intact. And because she was so young, she was only 2 months old when we started infant stimulation. they took over for those areas that were damaged. And that has been proven, that the earlier you start therapy, don't let them languish. Don't let the child just wait until the school system is ready to provide services. Get early intervention. It's imperative. And fight.
Yes, but
And
yeah,
believe.
and I've read a lot about this and listened to people, and yeah, so by the time children are 5, that neuroplasticity is so much more limited. So anything you can do beforehand, but it does make me think, I guess, if you've been a different person and had decided to put Suzy in residential care, maybe sort of seen her once a month or whatever, she wouldn't be the person she is today. So I'm not saying residential care is not a good thing for lots of people. It's the right thing to do for many people and stuff. But there is that absolute empathy and bond between parent and child, or sibling and child, that nobody else has really. So no matter what somebody, exactly like I say, no matter what somebody else might think and tell you, it's always wonderful to get knowledge. I love knowledge. I love learning new things, whatever. I love hearing new things, but it is that ability to be able to assimilate and reflect upon it and make the decisions based on the knowledge, as opposed to being told, like, this is what's going to happen, this is what you're going to have to do. It's like, okay, well, I need all the options, and then we'll look at them rationally, and then we'll make some decisions. And that's
Absolutely.
that's a huge, not burden, it's a huge demand, isn't it, to
Yes.
do that? Because it is much easier to say, well, the doctor's the expert, the doctor said, and okay, that's what the doctor said. And you're almost pushing the responsibility onto somebody else, really, rather than doing what you can do, really. What did Suzy think of the book when you read the book to her or talked about the book? What were her thoughts?
That was that was such a wonderful moment for me. It was interesting because what I did was I put it on Audible, read and we listened at the same time. And the early memories, she didn't have, she didn't remember the infant stimulation, all of that. And
no.
As we went through the book, and then of course as a toddler, she said to me, this happened to me? And I said, yeah, that's you. She said, oh my goodness. She said, I was amazing. I said, yes, you were, and you still are. And she was thrilled that I wrote the book. In fact, and you'll read this in the book, it's always been very painful for Suzy that she could marry and never have a baby. And, she watched her sister, the cousins, and it's always been a very painful reality for her. But when she finished reading the book, she says, Mommy, I might never have a baby, and I won't get married, but I have a book. I have a book about me. And she was so excited, and she's a real ham. I mean, when we go on book talks, I didn't have her here today because I know we had time limitations, but she gets up there and she makes her little speech, and how she'll never give up, and she thanks me. I don't thanks, but she insists on that, her father, her brothers, and she gets standing ovations. People are in awe of her. She has communication disability. She's sometimes not always easy to understand, but it doesn't stop her. It doesn't stop her. She's not intimidated by it. And she's thrilled. She's very thrilled that I wrote the book. She's a real ham. Where are you going next, Mom? So I'm hoping, for her too, that, we can get this book out. And she looks at the numbers and she says, oh, 10 people bought it today, Mom, and she wants to be the mentor. She wants to be the person who also makes a difference. She's thrilled. And if she were here, she would thank you for allowing me to.
It's funny though. It's quite rare that we're gonna, and you haven't got a book written about you. Well, I'll do this one a little bit. I haven't got a book written about me, and I think a lot of people, didn't they say the second biggest fear that people have is talking in front of an audience, and she just does it. And she just, I think death and then talking in front of an audience comes second, which is quite bizarre. But yeah, it's so to have that ability and confidence, it's credit to both of you, really. And I know this is what I'm going to ask next is a difficult topic to contemplate, but obviously Suzy is sort of the oldest living person with the Jouberts that we know about. She's had challenges with her kidneys, and she's had cancer and lots of different things. Is her lifespan the same as any adults is? I mean, it's hard to know with the doctors because the doctors were so wrong, 50 years ago. What is next for Suzy, do you think?
We just don't know. That's the hardest part for me. I mean, look, I know nobody knows. Nobody knows, but I do know that with all the medical problems that she has, and ban of children with this type of syndrome is compromised. My brother, who I adore, my both brothers who are doctors, and they try to prepare me, for the inevitable. But I won't be. I'm not to go there. It will be what it will be. We're going to make every good day good. We're going to bring all the quality to her life. If she lacks quantity, then we're going to make sure that she has the quality that she needs. Now she's living in a supervised living program, which she absolutely loves. She's like the Pearl Mester, she's a little, she knows everybody's business, and everybody's schedule. And she will tell you she works in the preschool, and it's the best medicine for me, Mom. Days I want her to stay home no, Mom, it's the best medicine. She loves going to work. They love her. And I don't know. I just know she's here today, and I'm planning on her being here tomorrow, and we're just going to make every good day good. It's a very painful reality for me. I try not to go there and stay there. I go there, but I pull myself back. I can't imagine my life without Suzy. I can't imagine without me. But we'll see what God has in store for us. And hopefully it'll be a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And some people live a very, very long life, and their footsteps in the sand are washed away so quickly, and they haven't left a mark. Some people live, maybe a shorter life. Some people live an incredibly short life.
Yes.
And there's something about their footsteps that they just stay, they remain, and they made an impact. That's, I think, what, Suzy's of a decent age now, but you think, oh my goodness, she's, between the two of you, sort of packed sort of 5 lifetimes worth of stuff into one lifetime. And you've made sure with the book and being willing to talk to people like me and stuff, just that it's there, isn't it? Somebody will be in a little bookshop in 30 years time, 40 years time, and they'll reach out to a book there and think, oh yeah, why not? I'll pick this up and read it. And I'll pick it up and read it, and it's just still there. She's literally in the pages of the book and in somebody's heart, and you cannot be doing any more. So sorry, it's you're very, very you're very, very inspirational. I wish we were talking over coffee, and I'd give you a big hug and take a hug back, because you are.
Thank you. I feel it.
You all are, the whole family. You and Al and Beth and Ben and Suzy and you and everything. What a wonderful family. I mean, it's a really inspiration. Sorry, I've kept you for an hour and a half now. Sorry, I didn't mean to take up your whole day.
No, my pleasure.
Just fascinating. Yeah, it's just fascinating how some decisions are made, some decisions are pushed upon us. Some people, that it's nice it's nice, as you said, in the world where every time you pick up the paper or turn on the television, it's just such terrible news and everywhere, that there are good news stories that sort of at the heart of them are much, much broader than the telling of one person's story. And that's what I think is important for people to realize, that this is a story. It's a story about life, really. And that's,
it is.
and everybody has a life, so it's readable for everybody. But anyway, sorry. Thank you very, very, very much for your time. Tell Suzy, if you get the chance to tell Suzy that we talked, tell her I'm a huge admirer of hers, and she's a wonderful young lady, and she's got a wonderful mum.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Gosh,
and I will tell you, this is this is Suzy. I want everybody to see this typifies who she is.
I do like the photographs. Yeah, no, I'll put links into the notes and everything, and tell everybody where to get it and stuff. But I would, yeah, it's worth the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Enjoy it for sure.
Thank you so much for having me, and I just wish everyone well, and hopefully we can make a difference. And they say if you save one person, you save the world, and she's already saved many worlds. She is truly, I believe Suzy is an angel who was put on this earth to make a difference for other people, and I'm hoping that we can accomplish her mission. And I thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much.
No, you're lovely to talk to. Thank you.
Thank you.